6Three podcast. Your home for the most in-depth analysis on all things sports, entertainment, and basically anything else you can come up with. Where we have some of the hottest takes, some of the craziest takes, but there we go, some of the dumbest takes, and where we believe that opinions are like. And now, to your hosts, Joel, Isaiah,
and Ben. Thanks for tuning into the 6Three podcast. I am one of your hosts with my other hosts, Ben and Isaiah. Welcome to the July 21, 2020 edition, episode 28 of the 6Three podcast. We last week completed our very long rankings list, posted the final results on Facebook and Instagram. And this week, we're going to try to not do such a long list anymore. We'll probably even whittle it down from 20 at some point. But we are doing a top 20 countdown for some of the greatest of all time at their positions in the NFL starting today to kind of still bridge the gap till we get real sports back again. So at 20, I'm going to play it. At 20, I'm going to take Ben Roethlisberger,
really,
quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And it was a last-second add-on to my list, which makes on my list 6 active quarterbacks on my list. But he's got a good record, 144-71, 13-8 in the playoffs, not too shabby. He's still going 17-plus years. I don't think he should be going much longer. But in that span, the ratio of like 3.6 touchdowns to 1.9 interceptions, throwing up a ton of yards, almost at 57,000. And I think the second best quarterback in Steeler history is Ben Roethlisberger.
The weird thing about Roethlisberger is when you look at it, he won 2 Super Bowls, but especially he's put up bigger numbers since he won those Super Bowls. Like he's had more weapons probably around him offensively after those years. But that first Super Bowl, I remember the first time I ever watched him or paid attention to him, I was like, oh, who's this guy? And I'm like, he was just this big dude that had a big arm, and he wasn't even putting up crazy numbers like he has been lately as he's gotten older. So it's kind of interesting how that worked out for him.
A lot of it was weapons. Yeah, early on he replaced Tommy Maddox, who couldn't even get it done.
Right.
And then somehow he went on and went like undefeated his rookie campaign. Like he went 14-0 or 15-0.
Yeah.
So I think he was definitely a difference maker, brought in a new attitude in the locker room where they were lacking a quarterback since Cordell Stewart pretty much with the Steelers.
Yeah.
So I think he's one of the borderline guys, but I think early on here on our list, we might find some of our borderline guys.
Yeah.
So
like you said, Ben, you look at his first 2 years, and they were his least productive years. He had the least amount of attempts, but they were only 2 years under 3,000 yards. Those were, like some of that's his earlier careers where he had the most success, at least championship-wise. That's a common theme as we've been talking about our list pre-show and a little bit is like some of these guys had a lot of Super Bowl appearances or wins and not great statistics like passing yards, touchdowns, interceptions, those kind of things. But there you got to weigh that aspect of because for, I don't know, as long as I can remember, quarterback's been the most important position on the field. It's the leader of the offense, and offense is what gets you points. And you got to have someone back there. So even though Ben Roethlisberger was carried by his defense or his weapons or whatever, you still have to have someone competent back there. So that's kind of something to weigh with all of these is like we look at some of these older guys, they didn't have great stats. They had more interceptions than touchdowns, but they still made 4 championships and won 3 of them. And where do they rank among a guy like Drew Brees who throws for 5,000 yards each season, all these things. So, yeah, it's a tough thing when you look at era, but I think Big Ben is a big bridge in that era, like from the late 90s to today, or early 2000s, to today. Just kind of going from relying on your defense and running game, and then all of a sudden having to make that quarterback your number one guy.
We were talking about before, how the games change, and he's the perfect example.
Yeah.
You're just saying, it's now everything's quarterback centric. It's a passing league, but when he first came into the league, I mean, if you threw for 3,000 yards, you were great. So, obviously there were the outliers and stuff like that, but if you threw for 3,000 yards, you had a heck of a season. If you do that now, you had a season. You had a season. It's just normal. 3,000 yards is nothing right now. So it's kind of crazy to look at. 19, I'm going to go with Troy Aikman at number 19. Let's see. Aikman gets a lot of flack because he was never really all that flashy. But he was a 6-time Pro Bowler, won 3 Super Bowls, had a Super Bowl MVP. He's put up some pretty solid numbers. I wouldn't say it's an amazing, but he won a lot of games. Almost 3,300 passing yards, 165 touchdowns, 141 interceptions, 62% completion percentage. I feel like he was on some really, really, really good teams. Don't get me wrong, and that's why he won the 3 Super Bowls. But like you were saying, quarterback, most important position on the field, and those are some of the best teams. Some will say, in NFL history, some of those teams that he was on. If you're the quarterback of those teams, you got to be considered in the top 20, in my opinion.
Yep, Troy Aikman, like I said, very much a borderline on this top 20 list.
Yep.
We did the 32, he'd for sure be there, but that's we're trying to cut back on our lists. Is this kind of like messing up your list a little bit? Like with putting Ben at 20. Ben, did you have to take away your 20 guy and bring him down?
I did have to take away my 20 unless I want to slide him back up, but I did take away my 20. I'm not going to slide who it is up. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing about this is okay, I want to make sure I include my guy in this list if I really feel like they're top 20 worthy.
Yep.
But yeah, because I'm probably gonna cut out my next one for my next pick. I can't imagine I'd put him there ahead. So go ahead, Isaiah, and make it rain on number 18.
Well, I will take my number 18 and skip my number 19 and 20. I'm gonna go with Fran Tarkenton.
Yep.
New York Giants and Minnesota Vikings. He had a long career, 18 seasons, but he's like one of these guys from like the 60s, 70s who has like pretty flashy numbers. 142 touchdowns to 266 interceptions, which is having an 80 differential in this time period, as we've seen looking through the guys of this time period, is pretty impressive. He's always seems to be right around that 2,500, 3,000 yard mark in all of his seasons, except maybe 1 or 2. But, he is a 9-time Pro Bowler, MVP, Offensive Player of the Year, had a great college career as well. But he seems to be one of those first guys that was more heavily leaned on as a key piece quarterback in the 70s and, 60s and 70s, where that really wasn't a thing. You just needed a guy to kind of, throw the ball sometimes. He seemed to be one of those first guys that a team really relied on. So I think that marks a pretty interesting and spectacular career for 60s and 70s.
When he retired, he was the NFL's leader in pass completions, yards, and touchdowns all time.
Yeah.
So I think that'll be kind of a theme. At least it was kind of a theme with my list. It's like, if you dominated your era, regardless of, how that era's football was played, I feel like you at least have to be considered.
I think the accuracy behind it too. We talk about how they were really inaccurate back in like the 40s and 50s and 60s and had horrible touchdown interception ratio. And Tarkenton, obviously, he threw 266 picks, but he played for 17 years. Whereas you got guys that I can think of higher on my list, like Elway, who, he also threw the exact same amount of picks in 1 year less than Tarkenton played.
Yep.
And I think he had less touchdown passes. So Tarkenton was ahead of his time for sure.
He has, at least the latter part of his career, he has his last 4 seasons, and then one season before that, a couple years earlier, was over 60% completion percentage, which, again, for this time period, that's really impressive.
Yes. Yep.
I like that pick there. I guess for 17, then I am going to go with Otto Graham. And I'm going to go with Otto Graham for that win and loss ratio is just crazy numbers. He had 114 wins and only 20 losses in the regular season, 9-3 in the playoffs on top of that. So he's only experienced loss 23 times in 10 years in the NFL. Didn't play very long. So doesn't have the huge passing yards either. I think he's just under 24,000, but 174 touchdowns, 135 interceptions. And again, in his time period, set a new precedent, was able to run as well. He was
a pretty impactful rusher too.
Yeah. Kind of like he copied Sid, because Sid Luckman was still even before him, but Otto Graham definitely was able to kind of bridge to more of a passing style league too. So we see the NFL change from Sid Luckman even to Otto Graham into even more of a passing style league.
Yep, no doubt. 16, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so, I mean, you kind of already mentioned him, Sid Luckman. I'm going to go with Sid Luckman here at 16. Luckman led the league in passing yards and passing touchdowns 3 times each. 5-time All-Pro. He won 4 NFL championships. His 10.9 yards per attempt, not even yards per completion, yards per attempt in 1943 is still a league record. Mm-hmm. So obviously in 1943, he was just throwing the ball down the field. And I believe there was I can't remember, I forgot to jot down the number, but that he also has the yards per completion record then for that season too. It was like 19 something or some absurd number. Definitely breaking the Madden stat caps, if you know what I'm saying. But clearly didn't throw the ball nearly as much back in that day. And like you look at that touchdown interception ratio, it's almost 1-to-1, which isn't great. But he was a pioneer at the position, really kind of changed, like you were talking about with Otto Graham, really kind of changed the way the position was played a little bit, starting to throw the ball down the field. Sorry about that. Really kind of changed everything up. So pretty cool guy to read about, and definitely my number 17 or 16. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy to see how much the league's changed, because if you look at Luckman, he had in his, how many years did he play? 1, 2, 3, like 12. He only had over 200 pass attempts, or 4 times.
Yeah.
Other than that, he was under 200, and quite a considerable amount under 200. Like that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean now guys will get 204 games.
Yeah, right. Before their bye week.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's crazy.
All right. Well, I'm like you said, Joel. How do we go about this? I'm just kind of picking the guy I have at the number I'm picking. So I'm going to go with my 15, and that is another current day player in Aaron Rodgers.
Okay.
Just incredibly dynamic player. We are like me and Joel. We're Lions fans. We watch what he does to us twice a year.
Lions fan, I think, right?
Lions fan too. Sorry, Ben. For some reason, I thought you were a Bills fan, but that's because you play them in Miami. But we watch him do it 2 times a year to the Lions, except that one year Sam Flynn stepped in and did it to us. But yeah, Aaron Rodgers is kind of he was the prototype for the new age quarterback in my mind. He can get it done with his feet, extends the play like crazy. He's just he's just good. He can chuck it still. He can still throw for 5,000 yards if he wants to. Could have some more postseason success. I know injuries have kind of done him in on that a little bit, and just his team not around him not being as good with getting to the Super Bowl. I mean, playing at the same time as Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, that kind of takes away from that too, the ability to get to the Super Bowl. But
that's both AFC, so they don't really affect him.
Oh, well, hey, look at that.
Gotcha. Just kidding. But they still had there's other guys Oh no, I guess I would think about Roethlisberger and Phillip Rivers, and they were also.
Yeah, Drew Brees.
Oh, Drew Brees. Yeah, but he was with the Chargers.
Eli Manning.
Okay, there you go.
Colin Kaepernick.
Michael Vick.
Rodgers hasn't honestly been on. I mean, I can't say that he's been on bad teams because the Packers were very good in some of those years, but he hasn't been on a dominating team, and he has had to carry those games as far as they've gone. So I mean, he definitely has a list.
Yeah, no, he's a perennial 4,000 yards a season.
Yep.
He can get up into the 40s for touchdown passes any season. So, as far as current day quarterbacks go, I think he's right around that Big Ben tier, right around that Phillip Rivers tier of kind of those, like, hey, if their team comes together and everything's on all cylinders, like they can make a deep playoff run, probably the Super Bowl, but they can't really carry a terrible team. They're not that great, but I still think, top 20 all time. I think Aaron Rodgers up there. I think his numbers speak for that.
His stats are going to back it up by the end of his career too.
By the end,
guarantee it by the end of his career.
84 picks compared to 364 touchdowns is
insane.
One of the most accurate quarterbacks in the league ever.
Yeah, for sure.
So I don't know. I have Rodgers a little bit higher, but I don't know if I would put him in the tier with Roethlisberger and Rivers. I think he's above them yet. I think overall in his career, I'd probably put him close to the Brees tier, but I have Brees higher than Rodgers even in this list. So I don't know why I'm thinking it that. I think there's like a middle tier, though, that still separates him from being elite, like the Mannings, Brady's, and Breeses of the world, but I think he's not.
Yeah, I'd agree with that more. Yeah, he's better than the Rivers.
An awkward tier where he's in between like the first and the third tier. I think there's a small two tier.
And if he had the postseason success, I think he would be up there.
Yeah.
He's in a tier I think Russell Wilson will end up in his career. Like,
I like Russell Wilson a lot, yeah.
He's really good, but he may not be that all-time great tier, but he's that like all-time pretty dang close tier.
Yeah.
At the end of Russell Wilson's career, if we ever went back in 5-6 years on what Russell Wilson's career was, I bet we might find him on the top 20 at some point too.
Actually, he's probably in my top 25, maybe 30.
I would say top 30 for me. Yeah.
He's on some. If you were to check it out, he's on some top 20 lists.
Yeah, I saw some.
Because his stats back it up. Like he is literally, and then they're getting into like next gen stats, and Rodgers is actually a perfect example of this too, because next gen stats like yards gained or yards created outside the pocket. Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, they're like absurdly high.
Yeah.
Way above anybody else because of what they can do with their feet. So.
All right, I'll try to pick 14 here. And I don't want him to not get picked. So I'm going to go with Roger Staubach here.
Yeah. Okay.
I would have picked him at later because I have him at 11.
Well, there's another guy that's kind of tossed between. But 85-29 in the regular season and 11-6 in the playoffs. Roger Staubach, at the time he played, was probably one of the best in the league, but he was also playing, again, like Ben mentioned with Troy Aikman, even the Cowboys have just been very fortunate to have some really good teams and conveniently have a really good quarterback to help along those really good teams. So Staubach didn't play that long in the NFL. He's definitely a traditional family man, so I think he gave it his all for 10 or 11 years and took a leave, and obviously military style, being from the Navy, Heisman Trophy winner from the Navy, but not even a bad – at that time, not even a bad touchdown interception ratio with 153 to 109, and still able to run for over almost 2,300 yards in his career as well.
Yeah, he was a great athlete. Could definitely run. Obviously not a flashy, numbers guy, but extremely successful. 85-29 record is absurd. So, he's definitely on the list. And if you listen to anybody who watched him, I watched him play. I remember my grandpa talking about it, and he was just like, Roger Staubach was literally the most talented quarterback they had ever, some of them had ever seen. It was just, like I said, he was on a really good team, and football meant a lot to him. I think you kind of alluded to it. Football meant a lot to him, but he wasn't going to play for 20 years. I mean, he was going to play his 10 or 11 years, and that was going to be it. So.
He was a traditional type of player, and back in the day, that was very appealing to a lot of fans. Even my dad. I mean, Roger Staubach was already 2 years into his career when my dad was born, but like my dad remembers the tail end of Staubach's career, and obviously my dad went to Navy as well. So just I think Roger Staubach's probably one of his favorite, football players of all time, and I think his favorite. I remember his favorite baseball player was it Johnny Bench from the Cincinnati Reds back in the day.
Yeah.
My dad will talk all day about some of those guys, and I think just Staubach being the traditional person that he was very appealing to a lot of fans back in the day. So. All right, number 13.
13. All right. Could go a number of different ways here because now the list is getting all not crazy out of whack, but a little out of whack.
Yeah.
I am going to go with Bart Starr at 13.
That's what I have at 13.
Yep. Incredibly successful as far as championships go. Obviously, he was Vince Lombardi's quarterback. Pretty cool. But he had 5 NFL championships, 2 Super Bowls, 4-time Pro Bowler, won an MVP. Again, one of the guys where, like, you look at the stat line and you're like, that wouldn't even be that great nowadays. But I think, you got to kind of take into account the differences in the game. Lombardi's offense was really run heavy. So it didn't let Starr really, throw the ball around like he could, because when they did let him loose, he had a lot of success. But yeah, I definitely think he's probably top 15, maybe borderline top 10. I didn't put him in my top 10 just because I need to see more numbers probably at that point.
Well, he's dead now, so you're not going to see those numbers.
Yeah, you're probably not. But to put him in my top 10, I need I got to have a few more better stat lines. But definitely, I mean, when you think about the birth of the NFL and the first Super Bowl and stuff like that, you really Bart Starr is the first guy you think of.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
It's pretty cool. Reading about him. I definitely think
it was definitely one of the most monumental careers.
Yeah.
Just when he played, to have the last 3, whatever they were called, championships, and then the first 2 Super Bowl championships.
Insane. Yeah.
That's crazy. And to just win 5, if the Super Bowl would have started earlier, he would have 5 Super Bowl championships in a row, and that'd be insane. So I definitely think he just he's the quintessential middle of the century quarterback in the NFL, or just football in general. He doesn't have those flashy numbers, but he won his team. Won for his team. He led his team. He did everything that was asked of him, and he won.
And that's what QBs were asked to do back in the day.
Yep.
All right. Well, at 12, I'm actually going to go with my 14 because I don't want this guy to get forgotten on our lists. I'm going to go with Kurt Warner. For the St. Louis Rams. Sorry, I'm just pulling up his stats. Yeah, he had 4,000 yards back to back early on in his career. We talked about him, I think, when we talked about comebacks, where he was injured and out took forever to get into the league and then blew it up. And then just had a solid career after that. Ended his career on a really high note. I just think he was a really solid quarterback. I think he could have had more numbers, maybe a little more success, but I like him right where I'm picking him at 12. But even though I had him at 14, I just really like Kurt Warner. I don't want to leave him off anyone's list. I think he would have, if he got a shot earlier on in his life, if he wouldn't have started the league at 27, he would have had those numbers more to back this up. He kind of had to deal with the hand that was dealt to him and the struggles that he had getting a spot. So in his being older and only getting to play a certain amount of years, even though he played till he was 38, I think he did just about as much as anybody would do with that kind of career.
Yeah, I Warner at 11. I definitely wouldn't want to leave him off that list either. It's going to get to the point here though where I've got 3 guys I was sitting at 14, 13, and 12 on my list, and I'm like, oh, are we getting past here, or I want to put them
I've
on,
left
but
a few.
it's like it's a gamble. It's like, do I want to make sure they're in?
But then you can't put them too high because they don't deserve to be. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so.
Oh, gosh.
No, definitely with Warner though. He's probably one of the guys that we've put on this list so far. He's one of the more accurate guys we've had. I mean, he's almost 66% completion percentage. I loved watching him play. Obviously, greatest show on turf. He was QB of that. That
That
team.
team was so much fun, dude.
He was insane. He had some crazy good years with the Cardinals too. I mean, probably a little bit of a rough patch from like 2000. 2-3 to like 06, but he was hurt a lot then.
Yeah, that's why they got Mark Bolger originally.
Yeah. He was hurt a lot then, so you can't. Injuries are unfortunately a thing. So, but then he, like I said, he capped his career in great fashion. So, definitely deserves to be on the list.
Yep.
Yeah, he really had like two peaks, like those his second, third, and fourth year, and then his last 3 years. Like he showed what he could have done if he was had more opportunity and was healthier.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, number 11, and I am just bursting at the seams on this one. I think the person I want to least leave off in this range for me is Terry Bradshaw.
Bradshaw didn't even make my list.
Oh man,
he's number 8 on my list.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, he won 107-51 in the regular season, 14-5 in the playoffs. Is actually one of the best playoff winning percentages by anyone on this list besides Tom Brady. So that kind of speaks volumes to me. I know he was.
Wait, Tom Brady's on your list?
I think it just missed putting him on, but yeah, 14 years in the NFL, and he amassed just under 2,800 passing yards, which isn't a lot. And the touchdown interception ratio is not good. It's 212 to 210. That's the worst ratio on this list for me, but I tried to account the wins along with some of the statistics. The thing is, Bradshaw was, again, carried the steel curtain pretty far with the likes of Franco Harris, and, he had the receiver of Lynn Swann, and he had the steel curtain defense for years too in Pittsburgh. So he had a lot going for him, and that really helped. But I felt like I couldn't put Roger Staubach and Troy Aikman on this list if I didn't have at least Terry Bradshaw for the same reasons that he was still an elite quarterback at that time that had a good team that was able to get him to where they were.
Yeah, and Terry Bradshaw, I mean, if you take away, at least for touchdown to interception rate, if you take away his first 2 years, that gets rid of, 27 more interceptions than touchdowns on his final. He went 6-24 in his first year and 13-22. So if you get rid of that gap widens a little bit. He obviously seems to have had some growing pains his first couple years, but yeah, I think I'm sure I struggled with him. I thought he can be as high as top 10 or he could be as low as off the list, just because he doesn't have the yards to back it up. He doesn't, obviously, like we've said, touchdown interception rate pretty bad. But he just won in the playoffs. He just led his team to victories, and his team led him to victories. But he was instrumental nonetheless in those Steelers teams in the 70s and 80s that were just incredible.
I'd say he probably deserves to be on the list. He wasn't on mine though.
Mostly probably 21 or 22 of you.
Yeah, and I literally sat there. He was probably the hardest guy to figure out because the stats just aren't there. But I mean, there's a few other guys where the stats aren't quite there either. I just felt like, that defense that the reason the Steelers won that defense was insane. Okay,
they were basically the reason that people coined the term "defense wins championships."
Exactly, because if that defense was just a bit worse, then I'm not sure Bradshaw leads them to wins. I'm not saying he was a bad quarterback by any means. He was probably, he's probably top 25, and he's probably top 20. If we take it by by how we've been doing it thus far, but it was just really hard for me to put on the list just because the numbers just don't quite back it up. Other than he won 4 Super Bowls, and he was the first quarterback to win 4 Super Bowls. So. It's he was tough. He was really, really tough on that to rank.
Yeah.
We get in the top 10 now, Ben. You get to lead it off.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm going to pick Steve Young at number 10. 94
Right where I had him on my list. I had him right at 10 on my list.
Yep, 94-49 record. 3,300 yards, just over 3,300 yards, 232 touchdowns, 107 interceptions. Won a couple MVPs, 7-time Pro Bowler. Won 3 Super Bowls. Only one as a starter, though. Maybe we'll get to the other Super Bowls too. But he did win Super Bowl MVP. Kind of crazy, the 49ers got really lucky with their quarterbacks for that stretch there. But he was definitely a scrambling quarterback, pretty fun to watch at the time, highly successful. If he wasn't sitting behind Joe Montana for a period of time, then who knows what he could have done. Still put up some crazy numbers for the time that he played. I think he probably would have been even more successful in today's offenses. Watching him play, I think he probably could have put up some big numbers if he played in today's day.
He's definitely one of those guys that, we talk about some of these older players that if they played today, they get creamed. But Steve Young still could probably transition to be, if I gave him a Madden rating, like an 84 or an 85 overall quarterback. Yep. It says a lot that he was one of those quarterbacks that, in the great words of Kenny Rogers, knew when to hold him, when to fold him, knew when to run and walk away. Yep. Like he played that last year, and obviously he had some durability because he got to sit for so long behind Montana. Yep. But a good touchdown interception ratio, great rushing yards, and even despite being a rushing quarterback that almost touched 4,500 rushing yards in his career, taking those tackles, taking those extra hits, and still, I remember in the last Madden that he was in, still was given a 94 overall rating. And a quarterback that's played for 15 years in the NFL typically is also a running quarterback on that. Typically durability concerns are going to cause their Madden rating to go down. Madden rating just isn't the end-all be-all, but it says a lot that the guy was like 37 years old, I think, when he retired, and still a 94 overall in Madden. That's pretty impressive.
When he retired, he had the highest passer rating ever of any quarterback ever.
That's why I said he knew when to walk away. He left on a really high note.
That obviously isn't going to hold up past that. Hasn't held up since, but it's still up there. I mean, that's pretty crazy.
I actually had Steve Young at number 6 on my list. I thought, just when he got the chance, once Joe Montana left and he got to from 1991 to 98, the years that he started at least 10 games, except for 86. He got to start because he just got one opportunity. But he had under a 65% completion rate only twice, and that was 64.5% and 62.5%. Broke 70% one year. He just was solid all of those years. 20-plus touchdowns almost every single one of those years. Right around 10 or less interceptions. He was, as we're talking about transitions in type of play, him and Joe Montana, obviously, but him in the 90s was a huge reason for that transition into quarterback-led offenses. Saw this guy could take hits and also throw for 3,000 to 4,000 yards. I do like him right at the top of the top 10, though. I think that is a deserving spot. So at number 9, I'm actually going to pull my number 12 from earlier on my list, since we've taken some of my top 10 out already, so I feel confident that they'll all get picked. I'm going to go with Brett Favre at number 9. So the definition and defining factor in what a gunslinger is. I had Drew Brees stats pulled up. 508 touchdowns, but 340 close to interceptions. He was throwing for 3,500, 4,000 yards pretty much every year of his career. There's an argument that can be said he didn't know when to hang it up. But he still was, he was productive in those years when he couldn't hang it up. He was all right. He wasn't great. That definitely hurt his touchdown to interception ratio on a couple of those years. But I think he was just right there at number 9 is, I think, perfect for Brett Favre, where he's not this upper echelon, great top 5, will go down in forever football history. 100 years from now, they'll still be talking about him. But I definitely think top 10 is perfect for Brett Favre.
My list actually had Brett Favre at 8, Aaron Rodgers I had at 7, and Bart Starr I had at 9. So I literally had those 3 quarterbacks at 7, 8, 9 for the Packers.
Okay. I had them 12, 13, 14.
Yeah, and it would be a deep discussion to be like, what quarterback would you take between Favre and Rodgers?
Yeah.
You know, we talked about that back when Doan was on because he's a Packers fan. But I don't know. I'd choose Rodgers, I think, just because the clutch factor, the accuracy. You don't have to worry about the ball being turned over on a whim. Like, he'd try to give you the best chance to win, I think.
I think there's something that has to be said, too, about his durability. I mean, the guy didn't miss a start for 17 straight seasons.
Yeah.
That's insane. Like, I mean, even, Tom Brady's considered durable, and that guy, that he got hurt, he blew a knee out. I mean, all these guys that are considered durable are not going to get to that level. I mean, the dude played through some crazy injuries. I mean, he played after his dad died. He played all these kind of crazy things. Went through all that and still was putting up some pretty solid numbers. I wouldn't say they were world beating at the time they were pretty up there, but they're definitely not world beating compared to the quarterbacks of today. But I mean, there was not a throw on the field that guy couldn't make. There wasn't a throw on the field that guy didn't try to make. Looking at his interception numbers as well. But, there's something to be said about that. I mean, he didn't care. I mean, he was going to make every throw. Doesn't matter. So he was awesome to watch. One of the coolest guys to watch play the game.
Yeah. He would have loved to have, what's the X factor in Madden? Gambler, where you can't. He would have loved to have that. But, yeah, I think Brett Favre might be one of the most important transitionary figures in how the NFL and quarterbacks work. Just from, like, this guy playing 16 games, like you said, not missing a start, them just relying on him, letting him kind of do his own thing with all those interceptions. Like, he did not always do what he was told, and sometimes it sucked and sometimes it paid way off, and they, like, reaped in the benefits from that. But yeah, he is just the definition of a gunslinger. And he got 70,000 yards in his career. That speaks to longevity. But that, I don't even think when you have the likes of Patrick Mahomes and Russell Wilson retiring, that's going to be an idle feat. Like, they're not going to look at 70,000 yards and be like, oh, that's nothing anymore.
No.
70,000 yards over a career speaks to durability, speaks to success, and speaks to a prolonged peak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Number 8, I think I'm still on good pace. There's a guy that I'm going to still have to leave out on my list here, I think.
Who is it?
Jim Kelly.
Yeah, he's my number 20, so I'm leaving him off too.
I know. Well, I had him at 14, and he was a borderline for me. But now I don't even think
17 for me. So
yeah, I think I've just called him a wash off. But I think I have to still put on Johnny Unitas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
he's on the list.
I'm gonna say that 118, 64-4, 6-2 in the playoff record. In a time that everybody was beating everybody and taking turns, and he played for 18 years in the NFL. That's longevity back in the day where they didn't have the same kind of medicine for durability. Can't really numb you up as easy back then unless you're just drinking a ton of alcohol. So, which they did. But amassed over 40,000 yards in his career, almost 300 touchdown passes, and then still had 1,800 rushing yards and 13 rushing touchdowns to go with it. He brought the Colts to, like, the championship games almost every year. So, one of the better players of all time for sure.
And I think, when he retired, everybody viewed him as, hey, this guy was the greatest quarterback to ever play. I mean, obviously that's, the sentiment has changed to an extent, but I mean, it would be definitely a disservice. You can't leave him off the list, in my opinion. And I think he definitely belongs in the top 10. I don't think he's the greatest quarterback of all time by any means, but he definitely deserves to be in the top 10. And, if you retire regardless of era and you're considered the greatest quarterback to ever play at that time, you're probably top 10. I mean, you got to be top 10. So,
yeah.
No, I had him right at 9 too. I think depending on the age of the sports writer, they may have him in the top 10. They may have him out of the top 20. They may have him in the top 5. I saw a list with him at number 2. I was kind of like, I don't know about that. But it kind of just depends on what era you recognize as the what you look at. Yeah, I think top 10 for sure for Johnny Unitas is perfect. I don't think he's quite in the top 5.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I don't, and I think if a guy had put him at 2, he's probably 91 years old. I just don't. So much has changed in the NFL, and we've just seen not only quarterbacks that have good win-loss records, but also good numbers to show why they had the good winning percentage that they did. So that was something that obviously early on in this top 20 countdown, we're seeing players that have either or, maybe a good winning record and not so good numbers, or good numbers but not a good winning record. So Johnny Unitas definitely deserving of a top 10 position. And I think anywhere from like 6 to 9 is a good range for him, to be honest.
I would agree.
But all right, Ben, number 7.
Number 7, I am going to go with John Elway.
Right. Yeah, that's my number 7 too.
300 touchdowns, 226 interceptions, just under 5,200 passing yards, 148 games, 148, 82 and 1. Won one MVP, 9-time Pro Bowler, won 2 Super Bowls, won 1 Super Bowl MVP. He went to the Super Bowl 5 times, lost the first 3. The real interesting thing would be to see, I feel like most people will probably put Elway in the top 10. The interesting thing would be, what if he didn't win those 2 Super Bowls at the end? Maybe he loses 5 Super Bowls. Like, where is he on your list at that point? Because I mean,
probably 16 or 17.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's probably in your top 20 still because, I mean, he was one of the better quarterbacks to play the game, in my opinion. But, if you go that many times and you don't win, I mean, that does taint your legacy to an extent. I mean, it just has to.
Are you taking into account how bad of an owner he is?
I did not take that into account. If I did,
it's like we didn't do Troy Aikman works with Joe Buck. We didn't take that into account.
We can take that into account too, and then they're probably both off the list if we're going to be honest.
Probably.
So, we probably shouldn't do that.
I had Elway right at 7 too.
Yeah.
Like you said, I definitely think those later in his career Super Bowls help him. There's another guy I'm guessing is in all our top 5s that has his second Super Bowl was the last year of his career. So I don't hold against him too much. Maybe, he had a team helping him out more. But, I definitely think John Elway is peaking kind of like we're saying, like close to the top 5, not quite there, but right in that range.
And if anybody had him at, like, I'd say number 5, I wouldn't think they're an idiot. Like, that makes sense. For me, it's to be in the top 5. I think we'll probably see it that the top 5 guys probably have the numbers and the winning.
Yes.
Like Joel was saying, up to this point, guys have had either or. Probably Brett Favre, the only exception, because he kind of had both, just because he played for so long.
He had ridiculous interception numbers. But
exactly. But you know what I mean? But he also had a crap load of touchdowns, crap load of yards. So, but, I think we'll see kind of as we move towards this top 5 here, I think you're going to see most of those guys are probably going to have both. So.
Well, here's my problem, gentlemen. I'm on number 6, and I only have 5 guys left.
I know. That's my issue, too. I'm like, what is going on?
And do you have a number 6?
I still have my number 7 and my number 6.
Well, okay. Then I'll just go with my number 5 at number 6. Hopefully we'll get whoever Ben has that me and Joel don't have in here. But with Dan Marino.
Yes.
Number 6.
He was my number 7.
He was my 5.
He's my number 5, but I'm going to pick him at number 6. He's one of those cases where it'd be interesting to see him play now because he was like I feel like I've said this about 10 guys, but like another one of those key transitional pieces in the like leaning on your quarterback to come to team success. Second year in the league, had 5,000 yards, had, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 seasons with over 4,000 yards, which was not common at all then. And just had over 300 attempts basically every season he played a full season, around 500 or more attempts, 300 completions. But yeah, he just had postseason success as well. He had 420 touchdowns to 250 interceptions. over 60,000 yards. I think, like I said, I had him at 5, but I got to pick him at 6 because of my list. He definitely is that top 5 element to me. He had postseason success. He had awesome numbers in an era where not everyone had awesome numbers, or they weren't looking for their quarterback to have awesome numbers. And was just on, like I said, incredibly successful teams.
What would happen if he had ever won a Super Bowl, though? That would change things. Because if he had won 2 Super Bowls, he might be a top 3.
He's easily the best quarterback of all time to never win a Super Bowl. Like I don't think there's a question for me. But
yep.
I just I feel bad for him because he definitely had some rosters with the Miami Dolphins that were good, but just not quite good enough.
Yep.
And I think that's kind of what he would be. He would be a top 3 quarterback. We'd be battling. People would probably put him over like Joe Montana if he even had 2 Super Bowls.
Yeah, but he still had some very successful years. Like he went 14-2, 12-4 a couple of times, 11-5. Like that's nothing to shy at.
Couldn't get over the Super Bowl.
Yeah, he couldn't. But
that's the only tarnish on his career is Super Bowls.
Well, I think that's the thing. Like he just like he's kind of like a Charles Barkley type. Like he's got everything there except the championships, except getting over the hump. For him. Or for Charles Barkley, that was Michael Jordan and the Bulls. And for Miami, it just was the other teams in the league led by just better all-around teams.
Yeah.
They might have not had a better quarterback. You could argue that, but he just didn't have the team around him to be successful.
Yep.
Number 5. Like I said, my list is screwed up. I'm going to go with Joe Montana at number 5.
Okay.
I see the 117-47 regular season record. I see the 16-7 playoff record, but 15 years in the NFL. I think compared to the other guys I still have ahead of him, played longer than he did. He didn't even touch 41,000 passing yards, but again, he had Roger Craig at running back, so he didn't need to do it all the time. 273 touchdowns. With 139 interceptions, that's a pretty good ratio between the 70s and 80s, and even early 90s, late 70s to early 90s. So 1,700 rush yards. He was notorious for being able to move when he had to, but he didn't do it on purpose. So I don't know. A lot of people for a while even had him back and forth to Tom Brady, who's the GOAT, because they just want to count championship rings. But the 49ers are one of those teams that had every weapon at every position.
Jerry Rice was.
Yeah. And Roger Craig was a good running back. Charles Haley was a freak at defensive end. They had who was the safety they had for so many years too? Was Ronnie Lott with them?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they had weapons at every single position for such a long period of time between the mid 80s to early 90s. So I don't want to give all of that to Joe Montana. And I say this too, if I was a Madden rating adjuster, I think Joe Montana, I would give him like a 78 overall at quarterback in today's NFL.
I think incredibly accurate. Certainly,
I didn't think he had the strongest arm in the world.
No, not a huge arm. Even coming into the NFL, he wasn't, no one ever thought he was going to be like what he was. So kind of not similar to Tom Brady in that sense, but just kind of like, okay, yeah, like he kind of proved some doubters wrong. But, yeah, he was on some teams that were stacked, insanely good teams.
Yeah, sure.
I don't think you can definitely – that's not a knock on him. You still got to go out and win the game. And if you win 4 Super Bowls, you definitely got to be on this list. 3 Super Bowl MVPs, that's pretty impressive. And he definitely, he led a lot of comebacks. So that was kind of what he was known for. So definitely is deserving on this list. And I definitely think he's top 5.
Yep. I think this is the lowest we should put him. I think top 5 is the lowest we should put Joe Montana out of respect for what he did in the NFL. But
yeah, I think he's the most talented quarterback on this list? Absolutely not. But that's not the whole
picture.
Picture there for sure.
Right. So how are we going to do this with our last?
Well, Ben gets to plug in the guy that he last needs on here. Ben's picking next.
So is it number 4, right?
Yeah.
Don't pick my top 3, otherwise I'm messed.
Dang.
I'm trying to think of who you would have on there.
Yeah, but I have I still have my number 6, but I think he might get he's probably gonna get left off.
Who's your number? Let's just say who's your number 6.
I had Otto Graham at number 6.
Oh, yeah, we already called his name at
We
7.
talked about Otto Graham.
We talked about Otto Graham. Yeah, but then I also have – see, here's the problem. Like, I want to put Brees here.
Brees is my 9.
Yeah, but, like, I don't know. We'll see what happens here.
Do you have anybody else over Joe Montana?
Other than
The remaining 3, right?
Yeah, who do you have over Joe Montana? 3 left?
I have one person above Joe Montana because I had Joe Montana.
Okay. Do we want to just skip number 4 and go to top 3?
Well, I can just throw Drew Brees because I had Drew Brees at number 9.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
I had him at 3, so that's going to mess my
I'm
mind.
at 3 as well.
Okay. But it's not going to matter, though, because I'm pretty sure our top
2.
our top 2 – I mean, Peyton Manning's going to be on the list, guys. He's got to be on this list.
Yeah,
right?
same with Tom Brady. So that's like, who's number 3 now?
So who's
Let's
number
just
3?
let's pretend this is a top 19 list.
Gosh.
3 available.
I'm not putting Jim Kelly.
Where did you guys have Otto Graham? When did we talk about Otto Graham?
Put Otto Graham at 17.
We did?
I'm at 10 on my list, but
Sammy Ball was in my top 10. We didn't talk about him.
Oh, I guess that might be the missing piece right there.
yeah, throw it out there. Let's talk about it.
We talk about Sammy Ball a little bit.
Let's
All
do
right?
Sammy Ball 4. Sammy
The
Ball.
problem is Drew Brees has to be on this list, in my opinion. That's the
Okay, just say he's number 4.
Okay, but let's talk about Sammy Ball and Drew Brees. Let's just do that. That's how we'll do it, and then we'll go into our top 3. Does that work?
Yeah.
All right.
Well, Drew Brees is in my top 3.
Well, that's fine. I've got no issues with that at all. All right, let's talk about Sammy Ball. Let me pull up his
All right.
All right. Here we go. Where are we at? Sammy Ball.
The 6'3" podcast.
Yeah.
Here we go. Sammy Ball. 100% the worst touchdown interception ratio on this list because he had more interceptions than touchdowns. But he played in the 30s, so a different day and age. One of the first great quarterbacks in history. He led the league in completion percentage 8 times, passing yards 4 times, won 2 NFL championships, led the NFL in passing touchdowns twice. And when he retired, and this was kind of the theme of my list, when he retired, he had the most passing touchdowns in history. He was probably the first quarterback to be a actual passing quarterback. So it's really hard. I mean, he's probably needs to be lower on the list. He's not top 5 for me at all.
Yeah, I know.
But, he's on my list, so we got to talk about him. And then I guess we're going to put we can talk about Drew Brees now too. Does that work?
Yeah.
Drew Brees.
Drew Brees.
Yeah. I mean, there's no real knock on Drew Brees, especially because he has a Super Bowl and Super Bowl MVP, other than he hasn't won an MVP award. 5,000-yard seasons, 5 years. Let me see. Yeah, 5 years, right?
Yeah, I think it's at least 4.
I think it's 5.
Missed by like 20 yards.
Yeah, over 70,000 touchdowns. Kind of not your prototypical quarterback, though. Definitely undersized, but obviously makes it work. Had a prolific college career, too. He's been on some very good teams, don't get me wrong, but he's durable. Would have been really interesting to see what would have happened. He almost ended up on my what-ifs list.
He's on my what-ifs list, so I got you covered.
Yeah, because could have ended up with the Dolphins.
Yep.
That would have been interesting.
Yep,
to see what would have happened because he and Tom Brady would have been dueling it out a lot. But yeah, definitely deserves to be top 5. I think by the time he retires, his numbers are going to be stupid. They already are. So.
And I think that's the biggest thing for me. He's going to have 80,000 yards when he retires, and that is he just plays one more season.
Not if Tom Brady doesn't retire. They're just going to keep going back and forth.
Right. But he's going to have 80,000 yards. He's going to have over 550 touchdowns. His numbers are just – they're going to – in those like that, 80,000 yards, I was just looking at the all-time list. That's going to stand for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be a very young quarterback now, like Patrick Mahomes or someone like that's maybe less than 5 years in the league who just pours it on for 15 years of their career and throws for 5,000 yards because there's no one really close to him.
I wouldn't be surprised if that number does fall at some point, just with the the way the game's being played.
For
But
sure,
you
for
said
sure.
you need such long-term success without getting hurt, without getting hurt multiple times, and that just doesn't happen. I mean, people think that it does, but it doesn't happen at all because, yeah, we've kind of been blessed, as younger generation. These quarterbacks have been playing a very long time at a very high level. The Roethlisbergers, the Bradys. We got to see Manning still play at a high level at the end of his career. Brees. We got to see that, and Rodgers. Another example. So we're seeing some great quarterback play for long periods of time right now, but that's kind of the exception to the rule traditionally.
Yeah.
So we'll see if that can continue, but it just doesn't normally happen.
Mm-hmm.
So Patrick Mahomes, let's cut it in the middle and say that he plays or throws 4,500 yards a season.
Well, I'd say he has to be played for like 18 or 19 years at this point to get the 80,000.
3 divided by.
Why did 4,800 times 18 and he's at like 81,000?
Yeah, he would have to play for 16 more years throwing for 4,500 yards a year to break 80,000 yards.
That's so hard to do. I mean,
especially the way Mahomes plays. Like Mahomes obviously has an arm, but I think he's too mobile and he's still going to take the hits where he may not. I don't think he's going to be that durable.
And the thing is, there's not another guy. I mean, he's the only guy that comes to my, in my brain or my mind, comes to my mind when I think, okay, he's got the ability that he could probably do it.
For sure.
I mean, there's other really good quarterbacks, good young quarterbacks, but they don't.
Joe Burrow?
Yes.
Yeah, even if Stafford, who has always been like a stat Padford type of guy, like even if he plays 10 more years and averages, 4,500 to get 45,000 more yards on top of that, I think he still falls a tad short of 80,000.
Yep.
Yeah, I was looking at that list. He's like really the next active quarterback who's still young enough to make a dent in 80,000.
Yep.
And then, he'd have to throw for 5,000 yards a year.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to last that long.
Nope.
All right, well, the next guy on, I'm guessing, all of our lists at our augmented number 2 spot is Peyton Manning.
Yep.
Yeah.
Clear cut. I mean, it's him and Joe Montana for number 2. I think, at least in my mind, I think you can throw Brees into that conversation. But what you're going to get from like talking heads and sportscasters is going to be Peyton Manning versus Joe Montana. Just because they have those Super Bowl. Well, he's only got 2, but he has postseason success. He has team success. 10 wins in almost every single season that he played. Started going down at the end of his career. I mean, he dealt with that, obviously, that neck injury. We talked about the comeback that he had. But, yeah, I think he is a clear-cut, for me at least, he's a clear-cut number 2 to Brady. 70,000 yards, 540 touchdowns to 250 interceptions. Like I said, 10 wins a season, basically all but 2 full seasons that he played. He was 7-2 his last season because he got injured, but everything else was at least 10 wins. So, yeah, just amazing. He's just an amazing quarterback. I wish he wouldn't have got injured, could have kind of stayed a little more productive, had a little more numbers to push him up, maybe even him close to 80,000 if he would have had a couple solid more years without injuries. But, yeah, I think Peyton Manning to me is a clear-cut number 2 on our all-time list.
Yep. And then the unanimous number 1 is the GOAT, Tom Brady. 219 and 64 in the regular season, 30 and 11 in the playoffs, and obviously 6 and 3 of that is in the Super Bowl. 6 Super Bowl wins when you have more rings in your than one hand can hold on your fingers. That says a lot. Still obviously playing into like his 20 is going in his 20th or 21st year. 74,571 passing yards, 541 touchdowns, and still under 200 interceptions in over a 20-year career. That's still averaging less than like 10 interceptions a season. That's super accurate, always able to win, and we'll see if in this new regime he is able to maintain those numbers. Because obviously we've seen sometimes when veteran quarterbacks change teams after being with another team for so long, it's like Phillip Rivers. I think we've just seen decline. We'll see how he is this year with the Colts, but I think it could be – is it going to be better for him or is it going to be better that he shouldn't have left. Like, that's what we expect here.
The crazy thing is, like, people still doubt Brady. So if he goes out there and, wins a ton of games, dominates, just has like a very, very, very good year with Tampa Bay, I think he's going to prove to a lot of those doubters wrong. If he gets to a championship game, maybe not even just a Super Bowl, maybe just a championship game with that team. Not saying I think they're going to be pretty good, I really do, but if he does that, I think he's going to prove a lot of those doubters wrong. This goes back to I still don't even think Tom Brady is probably the most talented quarterback even on this list. He's not physically, the most physically gifted or talented quarterback on this list, but you can't discount, one, the longevity. The numbers are great. He was another one of those guys where he's, at the beginning of his career, it's not like he was putting up insane numbers. And then,
right.
His first Super Bowl, he was okay. Numbers wise, he was all right. He just won games, right? And then obviously as he moved into his prime of his career, he got some more weapons around him. Having Randy Moss helps, but he starts putting up some crazy numbers, and kind of similar to Manning in that sense, and similar to Roethlisberger in that sense. But he's just done it for so long, and he still continues to win games. So obviously going to be interested to see what he does with Tampa Bay, but definitely clear-cut number one for me.
Right, and if you just throw in, like in 2008, the year that he got injured, if you just throw in like a average year for Brady, so say 4,000 yards, 25 touchdowns, maybe a little less than 10 picks, he's beating Brees in touchdown passes and in passing yards. Mm-hmm. So one on both those lists. He'll right just under 200 interceptions still. So if you just give 1 year of injury away from him, he is leading in every statistic he needs to be leading in to be considered the GOAT. So it would only confirm his case even more.
Yep. All right. Well, that concludes that top 20 countdown, which pushed about an hour. So we're going to skim through very fast our what ifs. Basically just give our paragraphs each and then move on to the next one.
Yeah.
And because I had to make the last pick, that means, Ben, you were the last person to pick a quarterback. You got to lead off with a what if.
Okay. I am going to start with what if Babe Ruth was never sold to the Yankees? Now, I think this is kind of a popular one. But yeah, in 1919, Babe Ruth was sold to the Yankees from the Red Sox. At the time, Babe Ruth was actually more of a pitcher. And, a lot of people say he still could have been a pitcher even well into his career. But that's a different topic. From that time, so in 1918, the Red Sox won a championship. They sold Ruth. From the time they sold Babe Ruth, they did not finish above 500 until 1934, and the Red Sox did not win another championship until 2004, which was henceforth known as the Curse of the Bambino. So let's say Babe Ruth remained on the Red Sox. Let's say they never sold him. There was talks that maybe he could have gotten sold off to the White Sox, but I'm not even going to go there. Let's just say he stayed with the Red Sox, for his career. In my opinion, just because of the way his career was trending, I think he probably could have been a two-way star for the Red Sox. I think they would have left him as a pitcher. But at the same time, he was starting to hit more at near the tail end of his time with the Red Sox. So I think he probably would have been a two-way star. Because of that, I don't think he would have hit as many home runs as he ended up hitting. But I think he still would have been up there on the home run numbers. He changed baseball, and I think he still would have done the same thing for the Red Sox, but just in maybe a little bit different way. And I think the fortunes of those two teams are probably a little bit reversed. I'm not saying the Yankees would have done just terrible for that many years, just like the Red Sox were, because the Yankees, they had other very, very, very good players when Ruth was there, Lou Gehrig, Jimmy Foxx, they had Murderers Row, Mickey Mantle, all those great teams. And I think they still would have had those great teams. But I think the Red Sox definitely would have been a lot better fortunes. And I'm not sure the Yankees. I don't know. Ruth was just a marketing tool for them. He was just why people came out to the ballpark for so long, and he just changed the game of baseball. I mean, if you look at the home run numbers, obviously some of this was due to like the baseballs changing, the way the game was being played changing. For a while there, they only played with one ball the entire game. So that ball would get beat up and cut up and dirty and stuff. So like it would just get heavy and you couldn't even hit the ball out of the ballpark. So that, the game was changing at the time that Ruth was playing. But like if you look at some of the numbers as his first couple seasons with the Yankees, he hit like 25 home runs, and that was absurd. The next closest was like 11. But then the next year he hit over 50. And the next closest was like 19. And it's just like he brought fans to the ballpark, and I think he would have done the same thing for the Red Sox. And who knows? I mean, what would have happened, down the road with baseball? But I think he would have definitely. You might know the Red Sox. Not that they're an unsuccessful franchise by any means. They definitely are a successful franchise in baseball. But you might think of them in the same light you think of them as the Yankees now. Probably not 27 championships, but I think he would have definitely turned their fortunes in the early 20s into the 30s, for sure.
Also, their owner could finance a play.
Yes. Also, he really liked theater, so that's why they sold. He did that with a lot of players back then. So, probably considered one of the worst trades of all time, obviously, but
First of the great Bambino.
Yeah, hindsight's 20/20, I guess. So
yes.
All right. Well, I'm gonna go with. I know, like, it would have been much more of a topic a couple months ago when the Last Dance was airing, but still one of the biggest what-ifs of the sports history, and that's what if Michael Jordan never retired? And I'd throw in both retirements. I'd throw in when he played baseball and when he add in his retirement to the implosion of the Bulls at the end of the 90s. What would have happened if he played those 2 seasons? Would they have won both championships? Would he have just gone 8 straight? I doubt he would have gone 8 straight. I still think he would have 6, maybe 7. He may have gotten even 8 over the length of his career if he didn't retire the second time and they didn't try to trade Scottie Pippen and get rid of Dennis Rodman and get rid of Steven Jackson. Like, they just would have kept that team together throughout the 90s. I think Michael Jordan would be talked about. He would have been a lot closer to Bill Russell's record of 11 rings. He could have been pushing – I mean, who knows how much longer he would have played if he would have played another 5 years with those Bulls. They could have had 10 championships, or they could have at least knocked on the door of 10 championships. Then again, him playing baseball might have helped him save some wear and tear on his body, and he was able to come back those 3 years and play better. Maybe he would have just – gone off a cliff, got injured in those 2 years that he retired, and just been not come back in his career. Like, everything happened for a reason. But it's a huge what if he would have never retired, what if he would have kept the team together all throughout the 90s and into the 2000s even. What would the NBA look like, and how much less would LeBron James have a character for being the GOAT? Because of how great Michael Jordan and those Bull teams would have been.
Yeah, that's good. So what if Tim Tebow wasn't so stubborn and set on being a quarterback at the NFL level and chose to try tight end?
Okay.
Hey, honest, this is a tough one for me because Tebow is a great college quarterback in a great system, a smart player, raw athlete, great passion for the game, and his drive for the game also led to partial NFL success despite being a below-average passer. Many teams tried pressuring Tebow to try, a different position. Fullback, obviously tight end was more common in the league, and especially when he started falling down in the depth charts. He was battling Matt Barkley to be the 3rd quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles in his last season with the Eagles and in 2015. And then that ultimately getting cut in the preseason that year caused him to pursue his other dreams of being a professional baseball player.
Hey.
Yeah, so What if he chose to use that 6'3", 250-pound frame of his and his athleticism to pursue a career like Logan Thomas, Trey Burton, Jordan Vanderlaan, Blake Bell, players that were tight ends in college or in the NFL, or quarterbacks in the NFL that chose to just settle to be a tight end instead. He's arguably more athletic than all those other guys that I just listed. He's more determined, I feel like, to excel than some of those guys. He seemed like he had constant drive to just succeed. Would he be a quality tight end in today's NFL? Honestly, I don't think he would be. But it would be interesting to see him try. I think he would have a roster spot, and I also think he'd be playing his last season or two if he was in the NFL today. He is 32 years old now, and a tight end at 32, not going to last very long. But in 2016, 2017, is he a borderline one or two, number two tight end on NFL squads? I think he's definitely used to a number two tight end in NFL squads. And I think he makes some, if not at least limited impact in the red zone in some capacity for a couple of years.
I think he could also, look at how the Saints use Taysom Hill. Obviously not the same type of player necessarily. Taysom Hill is probably faster. But if he found himself on a creative enough, a team with a creative enough coach, he could have been used as a red zone quarterback. He could have been used in certain packages now. And maybe he came into the league a little too early to where that wasn't, teams didn't want to waste a roster spot on that. So, it's really interesting to think about. All right. What if Steve Bartman never messed with the fly ball? What would have happened with the Cubs? First of all, Steve Bartman's life would have been a whole lot better. He would have never had to mess with, witness protection, would have never been hated forever. That's part of it. But, getting more towards the sports side of it, I believe the Cubs likely win that series. I think they were probably a better team, on paper than the Marlins. So we never get, the Josh Beckett never becomes a Marlins legend. He probably never becomes – I think he's probably still a great pitcher, but he never, becomes a postseason legend that year. We end up with Cubs versus Yankees in that World Series. And I honestly believe if the Marlins can beat the Yankees, I think the Cubs could probably beat the Yankees in that World Series. So we're probably not looking at, the 2016 Cubs as this team that, breaks the curse. You're probably looking at them as, a team like, oh, now they finally broke through, 15 years after the 2003 team. That Cubs team was loaded. They had Kerry Wood, Mark Pryor, those two, they could have been like that Randy Johnson, Kurt Schilling duo with the Diamondbacks a few years before that, that carry a team to a postseason, to World Series victory. So, I think if you look at it, it could have had all kinds of crazy ripple effects. Mark Pryor never again broke through. He always got hurt after that. He just had issues. Kerry Wood, he's pretty successful, but he never, the Cubs never again got
at some point. He went to be a closer at some point.
Yeah, exactly. And, he had a pretty successful career, but never really got to the point where they broke through. And who knows, they both dealt with injuries. That could have probably happened, eventually too. But, you'll just think of the Cubs differently. I think that's the biggest thing that would have happened. I just laughed at the Cubs up until probably 6 years ago when you kind of realized that they were probably going to be a pretty good team eventually again. And, I'm a White Sox fan, so obviously, it's crazy, to me. But, the White Sox broke through before the Cubs did a couple years later. So it's just one of those things where I just laugh at Cubs fans, up until they finally broke through a couple years ago. So it just would have been interesting. You don't want to tag it. I never thought the Cubs did not lose because Steve Barton reached for the fly ball. There's so many other things that would have led to that, but that was a catalyst to cause them to cause all these different issues. Because if Moises Alou catches that ball, in my opinion, the game is pretty much over at that point. But, the Marlins jumped on the opportunity and, went on to win that game and then win Game 7 of that series. So it just would have been really interesting to see what would have happened. I believe Cubs probably win the World Series that year if that changes. And who knows? Maybe they go on to a long-term bit of success. But ever since that happened, it's just you get into all kinds of things. They're cursed. They're all these different things, and you just don't have those conversations if that doesn't happen. So,
yeah, and I think that added to how sweet it was when they finally won after 108 years, because like people had kind of forgotten like the curse and everything, whether it was the goat curse or whatever curse they were under.
The Billy Goat, yeah.
That when you saw that happen, even though I was younger, I don't really remember people talking about it, but it was kind of like that was like, they're cursed. Like, they're really cursed. Like, that just doesn't happen.
Right. Well, and nowadays, the funny thing is nowadays, what would have happened is they would have gone into replay and they would have ruled him out because they would have said that's fan interference. But the umpires didn't call that on the field now, and there was no replay in 2003. So, it's just crazy to think about, the differences nowadays and what would have happened. Yeah. And, I agree. Like, I mean, they gave Bartman a commemorative World Series ring. Yeah. Because they felt, they obviously feel so bad because his life was ruined. Obviously, I think now he probably gets some relief because they won, but his life was literally ruined.
Oh, yeah.
Just because he reached over and tried to catch a fly ball like any fan would. So, it's crazy.
All right, well, I'm going to go from one of my curses talking about the GOAT of basketball to my next what if? Talking about the GOAT of basketball to the GOAT of hockey. What if Wayne Gretzky was never traded to the LA Kings?
Yeah.
So the Edmonton Oilers were successful. I don't have it right in front of me. I think they had 4 Stanley Cup appearances or 4 rings. So the NHL was not doing well, especially the American side of hockey, and they traded Wayne Gretzky to the Kings, and it definitely got butts and seats. It got people to pay attention to the NHL. It made teams in the NHL money, but it broke up an incredible team with like Mark Messier and all those guys that they had built in Edmonton. Gretzky, the great one, a lot of people thought he was going to be the great one and was thinking he was pushing up towards being the best hockey player of all time. Changed teams. He won a cup for the Kings, but I think he would have won a couple more with the Edmonton Oilers. They just weren't a big market. That's one of the places that big versus small market comes from. Is just Wayne Gretzky being the best hockey player on the best team, like almost being forced by outside means to LA. Obviously, it was his choice. There's a really, really good 30 for 30 if you ever want to look into it and the intricacies behind. It's called the King's Ransom, but it was ultimately part of Gretzky's choice as well. No one was like innocent in it. If he was never traded, that Edmonton Oilers team goes down even more in history as one of the best teams ever assembled. And they changed the face of sports with how many championships they could have won. I think they win at least. I mean, it depends on contract negotiations with everyone else to keep that team together, but I think they win 2, maybe 3 more Stanley Cups, or at least make it to 2 to 3 more. So, yeah, that could have been monumental.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good one. I think we're gonna have to go with maybe one more after this for each. But I'm going to go here with what if Donald Trump made the Bills great again? In 2014, Donald Trump was trying to take his USFL ownership experience to the next level, the NFL. When Ralph Wilson died in, I believe, March of 2014, his family put the team on the block. And Trump jumped into the bidding along with the likes of like John Bon Jovi and natural gas billionaire Terry Pegula. The 6-month process was complete, and Pegula got the team for approximately $1.4 billion. Donald was the runner-up. But what if he decided to push it to $1.5 billion? What if he could have coaxed Herschel Walker back out of retirement at age 52 to run the ball? And that would have replaced Marshawn Lynch beautifully after he went to the Seahawks that year. He probably would have given up 3 of the next future first-round draft picks to bring in his buddy Tom Brady. And that would have transformed the offense, who has always found trouble finding consistency while they were each bringing in each year a better and more stout defense. So the offense, to complement that, could have definitely brought them deeper in the playoffs. It also changes the political climate too, though. And end of 2014 and early 2015, he was already heavily campaigning for the Republican nomination to be the president of the United States. Obviously, if he did buy the Bills, this wouldn't even be an option for him. I wouldn't even think twice about it. So the Republicans didn't have any other strong candidates at the time. So probably would have lost to like Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election, certainly sending America to its demise.
I like it. That was a giant spiral. Like the Tom Brady idea. That would have been I don't know if
he would have given up everything. It would have been like the Mike Ditka giving up his entire draft for Ricky Williams that one year with the 1999 Saints.
You know, the Patriots would have done it too. They'd have been like, yes.
Thanks. Cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's a good one.
All right, one more here for each one of us.
Yeah.
I think both Clintons would have an impeachment if that would have happened.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I am going to look at – so I'm going to do what if the 1998 home run race in baseball never happened. So a little bit of context. 1998 home run race was between Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa. That really isn't the outcome of that, and what what happened really doesn't matter in this sense. But so what was happening in baseball at the time? 1994, there was a strike in baseball. So the season was like not really a thing. I mean, there was like half a season, seasons cut short, kind of like we're dealing with right now, but for different reasons. And fans really were not happy about it, and they started to really distance themselves from baseball, from the MLB. So baseball was in a way a little bit dying. Attendance was way down. All the way up until this 1998 season, attendance was down. And baseball was really trying to find a way to put people in the seats and to entertain these fans. So, lo and behold, this home run race, the single season home run record could be broken by twice in the same season. That's kind of insane. So the MLB kind of took advantage of this happening and started to do a lot of the marketing. Chicks dig the long ball. They started to really do all that marketing around this. This stuff happening, and home runs were up all across the sport. It wasn't just these two dudes. Some say, did MLB juice the balls? Probably. Did they juice the balls now? Probably. Did they? Were steroids just kind of a thing? And who cared? Yeah, it was going on. So who knows the reasons behind it? But MLB definitely took advantage of it from a marketing standpoint. So if this doesn't happen, let's say they aren't able to take advantage of it. I'm not sure baseball necessarily survives as a major sport in America. I think it's definitely a sport. It's definitely still going to be played. It's definitely going to be, a thing people watch. But, it's still right now, although maybe we're kind of at a crossroads again with the sport, it's still America's pastime. It's still, I'd probably say a top 3 major sport in America. But if this doesn't happen, I'm not sure it stays that way. The MLB would have had to find something else to grasp onto, other than, this marketing stuff for the home runs. It's like I said, it's kind of similar to what's happening right now. The sport, I wouldn't say it's dying, but it's definitely less prevalent. And let's say this home run race doesn't happen. Let's say, MLB isn't pushing home runs so much. Let's say they aren't pushing these teams to value home runs as much. I'm not sure steroid use even comes to the forefront as a thing as much. I think it was an aspect of the game before all this happened, and it probably still continues to be. Actually, I know it still continues to be an aspect of the game now, to a lesser extent. But I'm not sure, if teams aren't emphasizing guys hitting 50, 60 home runs a year, guys aren't going to be as pressured to take these steroids in order for them to be able to hit 50, 60 home runs a year. Not that guys, some guys are doing it now, but it's not as insane as it was back then. So I'm not sure it just is as prevalent, and maybe we don't have what is known as a steroid era in baseball. maybe you don't have these debates, does he belong in the Hall of Fame? He took steroids, blah, blah, blah. Maybe that isn't a thing in baseball. So really interesting to see what would have happened. I think the MLB probably would have found something else to try to push the sport out to fans. But, this definitely was something they were able to take advantage of. So,
yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I say juice the balls if they want, dude. I love it when they hit dingers.
You know what? For me, strikeouts are up and home runs are up. I mean, it's not, in my opinion, it's not the pure way to play the game necessarily. It's not the way the game was designed, but you know what? It's fun to watch. I won't be. I enjoy it. I mean, I'm a pitcher, so I enjoy the low game. But at the same time, home runs are definitely a big part of the game, and it's still fun to watch. So I have no issues with it. I have issues with guys cheating, taking steroids, obviously, but the balls are juiced and everybody's playing with the same ball. And who cares? It's all the same.
Well, that's the thing to me. If it's for everyone, it's for everyone.
Yeah.
All right. My last what if is one that hits close to home. We talked about it pre-show. What if JT Barrett was ruled short? I think we're all in agreement that he was short, but
I think Ohio State fans are in agreement.
Yes. If the officials would have not been all from Ohio and high-fiving and hugging the Ohio State players before the game, what if they would have actually ruled him where he was, and he was a couple inches short? So Michigan goes on to win that game, so that's a 4th down in double overtime, and they had the lead. So they go on to win that. They go on to go to play Wisconsin in the Big Ten Championship. It would have been tough for them to make it into the number 1 seed over Alabama that year by beating Ohio State, but number 3 beating number 2 sometimes makes them number 1. But either way, they would have been either the 1 or 2 seed. I'm guessing they would have beat Wisconsin. They beat them earlier in the season in the Big Ten Championship. They would have been riding that high from Ohio State. And then they would have gone on to play I think it was with Washington or Clemson in the college football, Alabama or Clemson in the college football semifinal, because they wouldn't have taken Alabama's place. They would have just pushed them. And I definitely think they would have stayed the number 2 seed. So could they have beat Clemson? I mean, they had the high-powered defense. They had the playmakers to do it. It was just it would have come down to Wilton Speight being healthy and being productive enough to match Dabo Swinney's offense for firepower. I don't think they do. I still think we have the Alabama Clemson national championship that year. I do think, though, that's the year that Ohio State lost 38-0. I do think it's a much better game than that.
Yeah.
I do think that Ohio State was just a terrible matchup for Clemson that year. That's why they couldn't score a single point. I think Michigan really takes that game's pace down a lot more and grinds out at least a couple touchdowns with the run game. But, yeah, I still think they would have lost. But I think long-term we would be looking at Jim Harbaugh's tenure in Michigan a lot differently if he would have made a college football playoff. If he would have beaten Ohio State. He might have even had the confidence, and he might have not lost every other time to Ohio State. Maybe he wins another one the next year or a couple years later or whatever. But we're definitely looking at Jim Harbaugh as a much more successful coach. He's been successful, I think. I still believe in Jim Harbaugh. I think he has only one season that's not a 10-win season. I still think he's a great coach. I still think he builds a good team. I still think there's a lot of upside for Michigan, but I think we're definitely looking at them bigger. Definitely looking at them in a better light. I do think, though, Josh Gaddis becoming the offensive coordinator maybe doesn't happen. Maybe they have enough success where Jim Harbaugh holds on to the reins of that offense, and they still play that typical old school Big Ten style, and maybe they don't have as bright of a future. Maybe they just have a better year in 2016 than they did when they had it, but the rest of their time was the same as it is now. So I definitely think it all happened for a reason. I think they're in a good place now, but I definitely think, Michigan fans are a lot happier with Jim Harbaugh's tenure.
Yeah, we want to see a playoff, that's for sure.
Even if they score at least 1 point in the semifinal, but they lose pretty bad to a Clemson Alabama type, that's fine. I just want to see them make it.
just want to see him beat Ohio State. I don't care if they.
Yeah, that's a big one for us too. We got to take baby steps first, beat Ohio State, and then get there. But all right, yeah, we'll finish it with this one. Ben already previously touched on it when we were ranking our quarterbacks with Drew Brees. And what if he passed his physical with the Miami Dolphins? So much good could have come from this. The 27-year-old quarterback in 2006 was coming off shoulder surgery, and the Dolphins brought him in and then wavered, and they went with Dante Culpepper, trading a second-round draft pick for him. Nick Saban looked long and hard at Brees, and then ultimately the doctors suggested against it just because they weren't sure how the shoulder was healing at the time. But the Dante Culpepper move instead of Drew Brees set the franchise back at least a decade, in my opinion. Dante Culpepper was not the same player he was in the Madden cover of 2002. Didn't have Randy Moss and Chris Carter anymore to go to Miami. He had, Chris Chambers and Devon Bess probably. So I would say imagine this, though. In the AFC East, 2 times a year, the rivalry between the Dolphins and Patriots with Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, Nick Saban, Drew Brees. Nick Saban probably sticks around, but did not pan out in the NFL, went back to Alabama. But, yeah, Saban probably saves his job having what we believe to be the third best quarterback in the NFL of all time. So 2 dynasties in 1 division would drive the rest of the NFL back crap crazy. And I just think it would be fun to see that 2 times a year. We already see the Dolphins give with Ryan Tannehill giving Tom Brady fits for a while. Just seems like the Dolphins always had Tom Brady's numbers. So just imagine Drew Brees with the Dolphins on top of that could change the whole dynamic of that division. So.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those what ifs that that probably out of our entire list has the most implications to this day. Obviously with Drew Brees still being, most of ours are about people that aren't in the league anymore. But that impacts 2 sports. Nick Saban doesn't go back and build the best college football dynasty ever at Alabama. They for sure don't have the same success. That SEC is a lot more competitive. But it's not as competitive on a national scale. You have the Big Ten being more prevalent. You have the ACC and Pac-12 being more prevalent. An even playing field than the SEC. Just kind of being in this dominating position for the past 10, 20 years or 10, 15 years. But yeah, and then like you said, you have this head-to-head rivalry that just persists every year for the past 15 years. And these 2 guys not just going at each other in the statistic book, but going at each other every single year. Because, yeah, like you said right now, they're probably not going to retire till the other does. But even more so if they were in the same division on 2 teams that played each other twice a year. And obviously, who knows? Maybe Tom Brady stays with New England again. Maybe they don't win 6 championships. Maybe Drew Brees gets a couple more. It would be incredibly interesting to watch that unfold. And, yeah, like I said, impacts college football and the NFL.
Yep.
Oh, that's good stuff. We could talk forever about what ifs. Maybe we circumvent our way back to it in a later episode and come up with a few more. But definitely a good discussion, interesting to think about.
RJ Shin never got injured. It was.
That's another one. Maybe we have his timetable on return is in the next week or 2. So
yeah.
Hey.
We'll see. We'll see. It could get fun. We could have a whole debate session where 2 of us pick a side and we go against the other 2. Even if it's like a Skip Bayless shot in the dark.
Heck yeah.
We'll fight.
That'd be fun.
However.
Our own hands. Make it a debate show. People love debates. People love drama.
Skip.
Feed the animals. That's for sure. All right. Good stuff today, guys. We will be back hopefully on the 28th of July. And we'll see you then.
See ya.
See ya.